Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome back to the Low Brass U studio class. It's the class about the brass where you're guaranteed to have a gas. And I'm your co-host, Connor Eisenmenger, and with us is our fearless leader, Zach Marley.
I have to remember that they can't see the whole screen, so me waving doesn't necessarily work.
Right, not always.
Let's get
Wave
you.
in front of your face.
Let's get you there, centered there. There we go.
Don't center me.
You must be centered. Let's double check those comments. Ask your low brass questions and music questions. We're not picky.
Right, we don't want to limit it just to the low brass, but we do want to keep a central theme.
Yeah, whenever I just do ask questions, it always gets out of hand. That's where every time I do something like that, just like a generic call to action, it's like, ask me anything. It's just like, it's a good way to get something that's not helpful.
Right.
I think I did something incorrect though with the comments. But yeah, we should have a pretty good show today. I think we're getting into like the real part of the semester of like, or I guess you still haven't started, but like we're getting in the real part of our jobs. We'll put it that way.
Yes, I would argue that I have started. Our academic year starts tomorrow morning, and so like for me in my specific position, the vast majority of like the prepping and stuff like happens now. It's like I think things are moving too quickly to be like making like big curriculum decisions during the year. So things are being decided right now.
Yeah.
So this is an intense week, but it should be. I think once we get like orientation and everything out of the way, it should be a lot cooler.
Yeah, I taught my first day at UNT for the semester today.
Very good.
So it was good. It's interesting, teaching at Tarleton, it's like just trombone and euphonium, and then at UNT just tuba. So they kind of balance each other out in their own special way. But yeah, it also is the reason why I don't have tubas in my house for the first time in a long time, which is...
No tubas?
I have no tubas. I'm tubaless. I'm empty nesting. I'll probably... It's just tricky because I've got both days the way I had to schedule it. I have generic tuba lessons, which are primarily C, maybe a little bit of F. And then I have specific F tuba lessons both days, which means that I can't really just leave my F at home. I mean, I can play along with it. I don't need it to be there, but it's just, it's easier when you have an idea to have your tubas at hand. So I don't know. I think what I probably will end up doing is leave them there Tuesday through Thursday. But that's me accepting that I don't play tuba on Wednesday, which I don't like. But it's like, it's the office is on the 3rd floor, and it's just, I don't want to carry them a bunch. I don't know. I don't have a perfect game plan. I'll admit that. I'm not quite there yet anyway. It's a lot simpler when it's trombone is big, but tuba is bigger and it is more unwieldy.
That's one thing that we have confirmed on this stream.
Right. That's maybe the only thing we figured out for sure.
Right. We don't like to give a lot of absolute answers because there's so many subjective things in the world of music, but we can confirm that most tubas are bigger than most trombones.
Right. So, yeah, in a perfect world, I'll have, home tubas, work tubas in other area codes, That is the dream. I've told my sister that I expect to have a tuba in her house at some point, in a garage or something.
What, a tuba at your sister's place?
Yeah, just so, when I go to Minnesota, there's a tuba there waiting for me. Just keep it in the garage, in a case.
All right.
No, that'll probably never happen because I always want a different tuba and I want to have access to all of them at home.
Right. All tubas are special.
Right. At least to me. That would have to be in the conversation of getting a duplicate tuba, which
that's tricky.
That's unappealing because it's like I could spend that money and get a different tuba that I don't already have.
Right.
But there are people. That's a pretty common thing for orchestral players is to get a tuba for their work and for home. But a lot of time the orchestra pays for that. So maybe not all the time. But let's see here. I tried to push the mouthpiece of my tuba hard enough to leave a ring, and when I stopped playing, are there any good ways to stop doing this?
That's a good question, Cooper.
Yeah, that's a good question. One, I think that because I think about this a little bit since because skin complexion does change that. I think I don't play with a ton of mouthpiece pressure, but at the end of the day, because my skin is dark enough, you would never see a ring anyway. Right. So I think that it's sometimes easy for me to take that for granted and think that, I never use any mouthpiece pressure. And but at the end of the day, mouthpiece pressure too much is definitely a bad thing.
Definitely.
But there is such a thing of you need some.
Right. I think that sometimes we get away from the physics of the instrument of the with the air pressure that you are putting towards the mouthpiece to exhale the airstream that you want, it's going to exert, some amount of force back at you. So you have to, there's a Goldilocks point of holding the horn onto your face so the air is not shooting out the sides.
Right.
And you always hear about those master classes where the trumpet player hangs the trumpet on the string and they walk up to it and it's maybe you can play your super duper, double scoop C with your trumpet on a string, but that's not exactly it's a proof of a concept, but that may not be best practice all the time.
Right.
Dangle your horn in front of your face.
And I guess I would push back just a little bit. I mean, Cooper, we don't know what your playing is like. We don't know what it sounds like. We don't know if the mouthpiece pressure is causing problems, if it sounds, bad, or there's a problem with the sound or a problem with range or whatever because of mouthpiece pressure. That definitely could be happening, especially if you're using too much. But I'm not sure that I agree that the ring is an indicator of you using too much pressure. Would you say that you get a ring when you play, Connor?
I get a ring pretty much if I play for longer than 3 minutes, because you can probably tell from the the color in my camera correcting screen over here. I'm a pink little baby, and so if I play anything, it's very noticeable. So even low long tones for 5 or 10 minutes, if I do that outside of my car because my long tones are too loud for the house, and then I come back inside and I see myself in the mirror, I've got a little ring, and it's it's all right. Now there's other players that are older than I that sound amazing amazing and like take care of business and resonate on the horn. Like it's clearly not getting away from their playing, but I know of some players that have like scar tissue around in like a ring. You know, particularly like I would say, and Zach, you may know this person, like the best lead trombone player that I think I've ever heard happens to live in Louisville, Kentucky, and did like the Glenn Miller band for a while. I'm talking about Chris.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think he has a little bit. I think he showed me before, like around like the top of his
Mm-hmm.
shop, and it's like that may not be good overall. Like he might like, but it clearly has not debilitated any aspect of that person's playing. So it's just kind of like, you know, it would be something to be. If it ends up being uncomfortable, like it hurts, then that would be, you know, a cause for maybe some correction. But as far as like specific ways to stop if it was hurting, I would say, you know, maybe for me, whenever I've had like issues where my chops, I feel like I'm overworked. It didn't really manifest itself in like a more pronounced ring or anything like that. But if I feel like I'm like hurting myself, usually I stop playing, and then the next few days I try to take things really, really slow and just not push it. Really low, mid-range stuff, lots of long, sustained stuff, nothing too harsh, especially getting into playing, like the very first few notes you play.
Right. I definitely would agree with that. That, you know, I think that I'm coming at it from a different perspective because I'm the only person I know personally that's ever been told to use more mouthpiece pressure by a teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was at Northwestern doing my master's with Rex Martin, I remember specifically a lesson where he was telling me that, you know, you need to use more mouthpiece pressure. And that was probably the first time that I ever thought about the possibility of mouthpiece pressure being a good thing or being something that maybe, you know, you should have, you know, there's a balance at least. I always thought the least amount of pressure you use, the better, and I think that that's proof that that's maybe not true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's so much discussion about like using less pressure, because when you're first getting into brass playing, that's a really quick fix for improper air or just like lack of experience, is you can just shove the mouthpiece harder onto your face and your range is going to expand a couple of notes and you're going to get that immediate return. And so it stands to reason when you're first getting yourself together and you're playing together, it's like if I shove the horn harder on my face, I will get higher notes out of my face. And it's like, to an effect, that is technically true. Like if you really like put like the maximum, if you just like crammed your horn into your face as hard as you possibly could and made your whole zone like, you know, super tight, any air that could escape into this theoretically perfectly tense vibrating surface would cause a squeak to come out. So that is true, but it's kind of like at what expense? And
right.
If your hurts, or it's just like it's not feeling like a practical, sustainable way to hold the horn on your face, then you can just use your intuition and say, all right, less of that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's, you know, I'm definitely of the mind, generally speaking, that if it sounds good, it is good. Mm-hmm. And so the only kind of caveat that I would say is if it sounds good, it is good, as long as it's not hurting you, it's not a physically painful thing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I would draw the line of it sounds good, it is good. Because we want to think about sustainability. It's like, is this something that feels like it's hurting me and it's going to be bad for me in the long run? You know, I wouldn't freak out about a little bit of it, but yeah, I think mouthpiece pressure, too much. I think what we know about mouthpiece pressure is too much can definitely be a bad thing, but maybe not, you know, the end all be all. Mm-hmm. Eli, we've got a Louisvillian in the chat. Eli currently attends the high school that I attended back in the day.
Nice.
So Eli asks, I'll throw it on the screen because that's important. We can't have that. We can't have the stream without the comments on the screen. What are some great tuba solos that showcase the low register? Ooh, that's a good question. That's an interesting one because I think, you know, when I think about the tuba solos that showcase the low register the most, I think about a lot of like unaccompanied tuba solos that also feature the high register, which isn't necessarily to say that doesn't mean you could do it, but it seems like that's not exactly what you're looking for. But maybe it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Eli, you do play some F tuba. I believe that's. I actually spoke to your new band director a little bit last week, and your name came up. So I think, like the one that comes to mind first is like the bulldozer movement of Ben Miles's Contraptions, which is an unaccompanied solo. And that one, it's got a lot of low Ds and things, and it kind of just hangs out down there. And I feel like there's a lot of that sort of stuff in unaccompanied things because it's like another sound effect. It sounds negative, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's kind of a sound effect playing down really low. So that's definitely an option. Ben Miles. Some of those movements are not exactly what I would probably be recommending, but I played that piece on F tuba a good bit. It's one of those like competition pieces that's come up a lot. But yeah, as far as low notes, I guess one that does come to mind, and maybe you probably heard of it, or maybe someone at your school. I won't tell this. I won't dox you. But what is it? What's the Barat tuba piece? Now I'm blanking. I gotta look it up.
I don't know.
Can't believe I can't remember it off the top of my head. Barat. Let's see.
This is why we're here. We're here to research the answers.
Introduction and Dance. That's what I'm thinking. So I'll throw that on the screen because it's got. I think that's it. I mean, features maybe a little bit strong because it's only got a little section of it, but it goes down to a pedal C. Let's see if I can throw that. This is the one I want, I think. So we got this optional section here that walks all the way down to pedal C. Or D flat, excuse me. But that's a nice little moment in that piece. I'm trying to. That's definitely an interesting question. I've never really thought about it that way. I'm screwing up which camera I'm going back to. There definitely are more. But I'll have to think about it. It's a good question. But that's definitely something. When I was your age, Eli, I was busy neglecting my low range, so I definitely like the question. I spent all my time spending the bare minimum in the low range. If the tuba split in octaves, I was playing the high octave. If they split in fifths, I was playing the fifth. It's like whatever case I could make, I was trying to get out of the low range. And it wasn't really until maybe the second year of college that I was just like, playing low on the tuba is important? Which it definitely is. Let's see. But I guess one other thing before I go on to Dylan's question, Eli, a great book to be using is the Snedeker Low Etudes for Tuba. So it's not a tuba solo, but that's where I tend to do a lot of my personal work and where I force a lot of my students to get into that book. A lot of people end up doing Bordonis down an octave, which I'm not knocking that. I think that can be good. But especially on the tuba, there has to be an element of seeing a pitch in the low range and internalizing what that is with, no octave displacement or anything like that. Looking at a pedal C like we just saw and seeing that that's a pedal C. So that's why I kind of like the Snedeker book, because all those etudes are really low, and you see the pitches instead of transposing down an octave. So Dylan asks, what's more important, tone or being in tune? Do you want to, since the tuba solo thing was kind of hijacked by me?
I'll spearhead this one. I'll talk about it first, but to get into it, I'll give you a really dramatic example. And
I love it. I love where this is going.
Example, you're probably going to figure out what my answer is. So, I was in a folk band when I was like 18 through 20 years old, and at one point somehow the leader of this group convinced somebody to give us a bunch of money to record an album. And within that, it was kind of like a game of like pickup basketball, because we had all these toys and all these resources, and like we were just like kids effectively. We didn't really have the experience to do what we were trying to do. And so in the
young adults,
like
but yes,
a crazy week of recording. Some of them, the people in the group were teenagers. So it was it was like we were all like high school to early college age, the group. Beatty, look them up on Spotify, great album. Anyways, there was one point in the session where we're recording backup vocals because we don't know any better. We came in or just like constructing a tune as it goes.
Please tell me there were background, like there were group claps also.
There are always group claps.
Okay.
And we're calling this what they call it, newgrass as opposed to bluegrass.
What
we were calling it back then. Anyways, I'll save my dissertation on the 2010s alt folk punk scene for another day. Background vocals weren't lining up. The reason being, we were all just kind of like, you know, throwing caution to the wind. We weren't like, none of us were like classically trained vocalists, and so the first person just threw up a vocal. The vowel was somewhere in between an E and an A. It was neither. It was somewhere in the middle. And then I went to go match it. I thought I heard an E sound, and I was trying to make some sort of E thing come out. And the producer says like, hey, that's not lining up. And I was like, I'm pretty sure like I know how to sing like in tune. And he was like, you're singing the wrong vowel. He was like, it's not an E or an A. He kind of explained it to me. Let's go back to tubas and trombones and things. We all kind of understand that like tone, when we understand like the tone of an instrument, it's the collection of like a bunch of sine waves, and depending on how loud or soft they are, that's going to create the tone. Hi, Brian. Don't wow me in the middle of my spiel. So even if by frequency of like hertz on your tuner, you're perfectly in tune, like everyone's at 440, if you're trying to blend with another instrument that is the same as yours and you don't have the same quality, they're not going to sound the same. They're going to sound different. And so I can't really give you an answer on which one is more important, but you will not.
Didn't you though? Didn't you just give your opinion?
Well, yeah. So I like, it's what our old professor Tony Baker used to say, instead of being in tune, being in tone with somebody. But I would argue that like both are equally important, and you cannot have one without the other. You can't actually be in tune without being in tone, and it doesn't matter how perfectly matched your tone is if you're not in tune. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I'm here for that. I'm going to answer a slightly different way. Not saying that you're wrong, but I'm just
All right.
I'm just gonna
Let's hear what you got.
I'm gonna take a different take, because that's what
right.
you know. They don't pay us the big bucks to always agree with each other. This is what it is. So I kind of put it in this hierarchy, and I'm going to add playing in time to it.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of how I teach it a little bit. And at the end of the day, let's get this out of the way. All of these things are important. Before we go any further, saying that one is more important than the other is one, an opinion. Two, they're all important. It's I always use the analogy of like picking a car in a racing game. It's like you got the one that has the really good acceleration but not the best top speed, and then there's one with really good handling, decent acceleration but not good top speed. It's like those are like all the three main categories. And at the end of the day, we want all of those. We want to use all of our credits in the game to purchase the best of the best for all of those things and keep building up that car. Hot take time, Zach. So adding time to that. So if we're saying we're choosing between time, tone, and intonation, or tuning, the order that I'm going to put them in. So I'll first give the order, and then I'll give the reason. The first most important thing is playing in time, then playing in tune, then tone. And I'm not. Okay. And I'll give my reasons why, and then again keep this with the lens of all of these things are important. You're not gonna win a job playing in the Chicago Symphony if you play really well in time, really well in tune, but have a terrible sound. Like, let's not pretend like that is that's how this works. So the reason why I say time is the most important thing is because at the end of the day, that is the most black and white thing. That is the most quantifiable element that we have in music. Like, it's the one that we can support with, look at this, look at these waveforms. This wasn't in line with this one, right? So to me, that's why playing in time is the most important. And I think also part of the reason why I teach it that way is because I feel like so much teaching in brassland is that tone is the most important. And again, I'm not saying tone isn't. It's just the fact that maybe having really great, tone is not enough. I guess that's a better way to maybe think about it. And probably not. They're all important. I'll stop mentioning it. So time that's the most quantifiable thing. Are these notes lined up? If we divide this beat in 4 when we have dotted 8/16, is that fourth one perfectly right at 1/4? And then the second thing being in tune, and in tune being, you would think, the most quantifiable, right? Because we can sit a tuner and it'll say 15.4537 cents flat. And that's true that it is quantifiable in that way, but at the end of the day, how many different tuning systems are there? Which one is correct?
Right.
So let me ask a few questions, and I'm not looking for you to get an answer incorrect, Connor, but I'm going to ask them to you, and I guess the audience as well, but they're a little bit time delayed. So if you're playing with piano, should you, the player, be playing in just intonation, or just temperament, or equal temperament?
Right. So that's kind of a question of like, should you adjust your intonation to the harmonic relationship of like the key that the song is in, or should you go for like the most beatless intonation with the piano? And I don't really know. I think that my natural inclination as someone who, like, my ear is always, like, my preset is ensemble blend, which is matching with my neighbor. So I am probably always going to go with, like, trying to get my pitch to be exactly the same with whatever my frame of reference is in that exact moment, which would be whatever, like, the closest accurate equal temperament that piano is at that exact day with that exact temperature and that exact humidity.
But so let me put it a different way. You're playing a solo, and like a classical solo, like a trombone solo, and in the piano part is a major triad. That's it. I know that's probably not how it is, but it's just 1 3 5 just. And you have the E. Should you lower it? Should you not lower it?
The question is the E doubled in the piano?
Right. I mean, in this case, it is.
Then I will double the piano.
Right.
Equal temperament.
And then if it were not, and you had
Just
to put...
temperament.
But you see, I mean, and again, I'm not telling you
so
things you don't know.
It's right. So you're right. So in the moment, it would have to change.
And then let me ask this question, because I was talking about this today. I was working on... Well, I wasn't really working on it with a student, but we were talking about Ride of the Valkyries. And so Ride of the Valkyries, the major portion of it, especially, tuba land, we don't play on the minor one, and trombones play on both. But that ends with a major triad, And so that's what you get in the hall. Mm-hmm. And then my question is, and I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer necessarily, in a really, like, you're taking a professional audition, you're in a very reverberant hall, do you tune those major thirds down so that when those other notes are ringing, it is ringing in the most, perfect ratio triad possible, which would be with a lowered third, would be a slightly raised fifth, right? We know this. Mm-hmm. Should you lower that third, assuming that all those notes will be heard at one time, or should you not do that because in isolation it could sound low if you're thinking horizontally instead of vertically?
I'm trying to think in the harmonic context of like the harmony doesn't change. It stays like once
Correct.
It's in B major for a long time. It's there.
Well, and I'm literally just talking about the snapshot of the end of the excerpt, where especially the
just that chord.
Right, where you just.
I'd be inclined to lower that third. Would that be the incorrect decision?
My point is that there isn't necessarily a perfect answer. Because I think that depending on how I think if the hall was really dead, thinking about like a very controlled like practice room, I think that if you lower the third, it might sound flat.
Yeah. Are you talking about in isolation, like just like trombone 2 playing by themselves?
Yeah. Any of the parts, but yeah, in isolation.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, particularly if you're playing an excerpt in an audition. It's like, do you lower the third? Because I guess you're right, because like the echo in the room, you're still going to hear, you know, F sharps and Bs in a little bit, or at least like your ear is going to be informed by them.
And especially, you know, most orchestral auditions are on stage at the hall.
And it's going to be super ringy. Where
you're like one person, like one chair on stage by yourself. No, you know, that hall is designed to have bodies on stage that soak up sound, chairs on stage that soak up sound, humans in the audience that soak up sound. This is like no more than 10 people in this entire performance hall. It's way more reverberant than usual. And my point is, we don't have to go too deep into this specific scenario, is that I don't know that there is a perfect answer to that question, and I don't know that there's a perfect answer to, like, I don't think there is playing perfectly in tune.
Right.
I think
it's
that there,
subjective.
Right. And at the end of the day, who's to say one system is better than the other? I think in, you know, quote unquote Western music, the idea is that if the beats go against each other, it's bad. If they work with each other, it's good.
Right.
Which gets into ratios, which this is not a math class, so I'm not going to try to make, you know, anybody work too hard. I also just realized that I did not change the episode number, which is terrible. Everyone's like, I already watched episode 12.
It's episode 13.
It's episode 13. How many snakes are there?
Exactly this many.
So it is now fixed. Everything can go on as normal. But yes, so that's why I'd say that's, you know, in time is the most quantifiably, you know, perfect thing. Then playing in tune, because it's pretty quantifiable, but there are some issues. And then, you know, I always ask this question of mathematically tell me what the best sound is.
Right.
And, you know, there is some kind of math to it. There, you know, we can look at the spectral analysis and say it's good when this frequency is higher than this one, you know, this overtone in this situation. So, you know, there is some kind of logic to it, but it's just not, it's not that simple. And then right. Keith Packman, Professor Packman, says, to quote an old head joke, I'd rather be sharp than out of tune. We are monophonic instruments, so I'd focus on, I was reading the thing on the screen that went away, so I'd focus on just the note that I'm currently playing.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and I would say that's my general rule of thumb. I just think it's interesting to pose it as a question and pose it as an idea that could, focusing on the note you're playing could clash with what's in the room, potentially.
Right.
And I think that's how I play that, you know, specifically Ride of the Valkyries. I tend to not lower the third. I certainly wouldn't raise it, but, you know, also we have a cat sighting.
Yeah, we got a cat in the house. Oh, hello. Yeah, I would say, like, in all of the time that I've ever recorded myself, ever in my entire life, and I go back and listen and a note sounds wrong to me, it's usually not because, oh, it was a third in the chord and I lowered it 17 cents or whatever. It's usually because I played something way sharp or I played something way flat, and it's because I just didn't do it right. It was like a way bigger issue.
Yeah.
So like we're talking about like an issue that for me, my intonation problems are just play correctly. Like just be right in the first place, and then we can talk about that stuff. You know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what most of the time sticks out, you know, especially doing all my YouTube videos. It's like, if I wanted to, I could pitch correct everything. I don't, because that would be, one, not fun, two, you know, you could go crazy doing something like that.
Right.
Every note could go up 2 cents, down 2 cents, up 1.5, you know, there'd be no limit if you decided to go that direction. But, you know, just again, like recording yourself, it's generally not the one note that is like 3 cents sharp or 3 cents flat. It's usually not enough for most of us to hear it and say that sounds bad.
Right. And even like when I think I'm like sounding pretty good, I'll turn on a little tonal energy with like the tuner, and it's just like, man, you're 400 cents sharp. Like, this is the wrong instrument. Like, what are you doing?
400. That's definitely a good bit.
Yeah.
One would argue that's the wrong note by 4 half steps.
It's not good when you get that from your tuner. But yeah, so like when I think about like just like perfect intonation, or like what would I do if I'm playing in a trombone section, like which tuning system would I adhere to? It's like, man, like even when I'm just playing by myself, like we're clearly not adhering to a very strict tuning system.
Right. And that's at the end of the
probably be a little more careful and cognizant of that.
Yeah, but I just think at the end of the day they can conflict, and there's not a perfect answer. And I think we have to bend those rules and bend what we're doing. I think it's just like make it sound as, as even as you can. Because there are also other situations that we could get into of like, let's make a really simple piece, but it's like you hold a chord, then we change one note, then we change one note. You could find yourself moving away from it really quickly. Mm-hmm. Like let's just say there's a major triad, just like C, E, G, and then the C and G drop out and the E was lowered, and then the E is now the bass, but it's it's sustained, and now it's E, G sharp, B. Should the G sharp then be what, 34 cents flat?
Right. It's like we're gonna lose our minds trying to perfectly be in tune.
Right. And with most with most modern instruments, that's like an impossible thing to really succeed at doing.
I think about that stuff all the time, like whenever it's like you're like common tones inside of like trombone backgrounds in like big band, where it's like you've got the third, then all of a sudden it's like C major going to A minor, now you're the fifth, and it's like, oh, like I was holding it out through the whole like swell. It's like, do I raise it up now? What do I do? Right,
but it's like at the end of the day, it's like, who knows, because there's probably an instrument that is not tuned in that same way, right? I think we've lost our esteemed colleague.
Sorry, my connection got weird just now. So
we can hear you, but you have frozen for whatever reason. Oh, you're back. You're back with us. I see eye movement.
Hello. Sorry about that.
So yeah, they're just, it's a conflicting thing. It's difficult. It's just not perfect. It's an imperfect system. So there's a really long-winded way of saying, that all of them are important, but you can't really pick one. And they're, especially with tone, because I think it gets complicated with. There are people who sound completely different, but both sound good.
Right. There's lots of different ways trombones can sound. Even in like, we talk about like the uniformity of orchestral playing, but it's like there's a diversity of tones if you look around at like even like people that are playing principal and orchestras that are like even outside of like solo stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of different sounds out there.
I think Eli is meaning this as a compliment. I'm taking it as a compliment. I don't watch all of Adam Neely's videos, but I do find some of them entertaining and interesting. Are you hip to the Adam Neely videos?
No. Who is?
He's a New York bassist who kind of has, I would say, music theory videos, but maybe that's overly simplifying what his brand is and what he does. But he's like he is a bass player who plays, in the jazz-ish sort of stuff and commercial music and things like that, but has a very good background in theory, jazz theory, that sort of stuff, and, talks about it. I'm surprised you haven't heard of him. He definitely has a large following on this platform that we currently are on.
I know I've heard the name, I just haven't.
You probably would recognize his face. But yeah, I like some of his videos. I don't watch him religiously or anything like that. But he definitely knows what he's talking about. It's a little hot takey, but it's good. It's good stuff. Are you looking him up now? Are you?
No, I'm not looking him up, but I will.
You don't have to. You're not going to be. There won't be a quiz on this later.
Is this on the test?
No, it's not on the test.
I'm having to decide all that stuff right now. I'm teaching a music appreciation course, this semester, and I have to decide like the curriculum is like huge. It's like there's no
right. Are you gonna play Drop the Needle on a 40-minute symphony?
Yes, I am. I'm going to do that. But I'm like the curriculum comes with like all these like discussions and quizzes and like labs and activities, and it's like what dedicated like audiophile was this high school class designed for? Like this is so intense.
Right.
But so I'm peeling it back. We're just gonna do like the fun lessons.
I think sorry to interrupt. I got excited by Keith's comment. Keith says that the tone thing is a recent observation for him. You can show up to an audition with the best sounding purple ever, but the committee is looking for green. Purple is still great, but won't fit the bill. And I think that's such a beautiful way to put it. I don't know if that's completely original, but we're giving Professor Packman all the credit on that one. But that's totally it. You know, at the end of the day, you can't appease everybody, and you know, the biggest orchestral sound doesn't always sound good in a big band. The most pointed big band lead trombone sound may not sound great on second trombone in the orchestra. You know, it's all about choices, and it's about convention. There's so many different things. So we can talk about that specifically with jazz trombone, and that, you know, it used to be convention that you played tiny horns. That was the thing. You know, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, I don't know exactly when we start. Like, when does the 3B become important? You know, I feel like with J.J. Johnson, you know, sometimes playing like a partial 2B, partial 3, like a 3B bell. It's like we kind of move that direction, but we're still not to very many 525 bore instruments or 547 bore trombones. You know, especially Keith is talking about, or I assume Keith is kind of alluding to the fact that, you know, he's taking several military band auditions, and he's gone through some equipment changes, and you know, he used to play a bigger horn, which, you know, in tuba land we're kind of always taught that that's the best. You know, bigger is better, and that's, you know, that's the way to go. Everyone should play everything on a 6/4 C tuba, and that's what everybody wants to hear. But at the end of the day, in a wind band audition, that might not be the best choice. And I think that, you know, Keith was playing on what I would say is a large 5/4 in, you know, a PT6, a rotor PT6, and then switched to correct me if I'm wrong, Keith. I think of it as a 4/4, but I think it might be his new horn is listed as a 5/4. But I would say a small 5/4, large 4/4 Besson piston tuba, which I think Keith, you know, purchased, and I agree with him that it fit the bill for the auditions that he was looking for, in the way that maybe it was more green, and that's what the committee wanted, instead of his old tuba that was purple.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a great way to think about it, and that's why I always say there are multiple good sounds. Mm-hmm. You know, what defines a good sound? And at the end of the day, I always come back to the word like clarity, clear, you know, pure, all kind of meaning the same sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But that's what makes a sound good. What makes it great, or what makes it correct, or makes it the best gets really, you know, it gets really complicated. Keith says he's fine with saying his tuba is a 4/4. No offense for a good tuba. Right, and that's the thing, and, you know, I think Keith can probably, you know, I'm a weird situation in what tuba I have played for my, you know, what C tuba I played for my entire, like, tuba life, essentially. The only C tuba I've ever owned is a 6/4 C tuba that, you know, if you watch this channel, you've seen. A lot of times people, and I'll you know, hopefully I'm not oversharing Keith's, you know, history. Keith has had many more different tubas than I've had. He's pretty much always has two main ones. I know he's had three occasionally, but, you know, two main tubas, one F, one C, and the C started out big but not huge, got a little bit bigger, and then went to the smallest horn that he's ever had now. So there's that whole thing, and, you know, Connor, you probably can speak to some of that too a little bit. You know, it's like you've kind of had some horn changes of sizes a little bit, you know, especially on the small bore or smallish bore trombone land. You know, having your olds for a long time that was pretty small, and then moving over to the Edwards, which is probably what in small bore land what we'd call big, I guess. and then the which you still have, by the way, but the king being kind of the medium-ish one, or maybe small. So talking, like, when we zoom in so far to different small bore trombones, it gets kind of complicated on what's, like, they're all small, right?
Right. I'm assuming that we transitioned at some point to talking about the different horns and their sizes. My internet went weird for a second.
Sorry, yeah, I kind of thought so. I kind of got blank eyes, or no. It was a little unclear. I basically just recapped your 3 small bores that you've had, how you went small, big to medium inside of the confines of small bore trombones, which Keith did, I would say, medium, large, small. And for me with small bores, I guess I went, because that's the only one that I've really, like, moved around, I guess. And for me, small bores, I went from, I guess what I'd say, I went from a 500 bore Con to a 508 bore Edwards to another 508, 509 bore Bach, but then also picked up a 525 bore instrument. And so, all these sorts of things, it's like there are trends in the industry, and then there's also your personal feeling. And I think, we've mostly talked about instruments, but we could say the same thing about mouthpieces. I feel like, Connor, you've had the most, like, up and down of small shank trombone mouth sizing for the same sort of work. Like, you've stayed consistent in what you're using them for, but they've gone up and down. There was a time where you wanted to go as big as possible, basically, on a small bore, and now you're not as small as possible by any stretch, but you're
comfortably small.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was more of like it was good to, like, test the outer limits and see, like, what worked and what didn't. I think it was appropriate at the time of my development to just, like, try those things out, because then I learned, like, that if my goal was to get some sort of larger tone for the sake of, like, brilliance or, like, clarity or projection or whatever the need was, just mechanically increasing the size of the equipment has diminishing returns and often doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And what I found was, like, I just need to play the equipment that, like, my physiology naturally resonates with, or that aligns itself with the sound that I hear in my head. And that ended up being smaller than I thought.
Right. And I think especially, like, in school, I would say that was not as commonly told to us, like, just not zooming into one teacher or anything, but just thinking about all my collegiate teachers. I don't think any of them were ever saying smaller is where you need to go.
Right.
Like,
it was usually not.
It was either the medium is good or go large. That was kind of, I feel like, the overall, like, I mean, that's a very broad statement.
It's like an ideological trend that's been going on for a long time, and that, like, it makes total aesthetic sense, and, like, pretty much everybody can make it work on a bigger setup and do that type of work, and it sounds cool. It sounds awesome. I just remember, like, the times that I've been told that my equipment sounds big are when I am playing small things. Like, I distinctly remember, like, going into, like, I think it was, like, jam session at Phyllis's back when that used to be a thing, and the trombone player asked me, like, oh, is that a large bore? I was like, no, like 508, or maybe it was even smaller than that. He's like, oh, like, sounds that thing. It's like, no, I was just playing on my puny thing. And I think what it meant was, like, the smaller instruments, for whatever reason, like, I don't think it's a physiological thing. I think it's more of a sound concept thing, and a kinesthetic feeling of, like, that's the correct amount of metal, that the sound in my head and the way that I blow into it, it resonates for me.
Right. That's definitely, a big part of it is the sound concept in your head. I think that with equipment things, that's the number one thing. And that's also, it's also a convenient answer too, because no one wants to hear, yeah, your problems will be solved if you buy this $40,000 tuba.
Right.
Or you'll, even with mouthpieces, like, you need to buy this $300 mouthpiece. In general, I try to advocate not spending a killing on mouthpieces. That's one of the biggest reasons why I was interested in Dennis Wick. I'd been playing a lot of their mouthpieces, but what I also like is that when a student asks me what I'm playing or what should they play, I can tell them a Dennis Wick and know that they're not going to, I mean, $100 is still not nothing, you know, and I mean, some of the trombone mouthpieces are cheaper than that. But I understand that, you know, money is very relative, but a $100 mouthpiece can work. You don't need a $300 mouthpiece. And the people, you know, the professionals who play on those mouthpieces, in general, it's like a lot of them are looking for this small 1% difference to make them a better player. And I think that a lot of younger players, a lot of the students that I've had over the years, the generalization is like, this piece of equipment is going to take me from being in the top or being in the bottom group in the school to the Chicago Symphony. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that that's, I know for a fact that that's not true, but I think that equipment changes in general are a little bit, they're smaller magnitudes of difference. You know, like I think a perfect example is, you know, sometimes you don't always play on your equipment. Like, you recently performed on my trombone. You had your own mouthpiece, but you had to play on my trombone, and you know that instrument. You've played it several times. That wasn't your first performance on it. But, you know, you get into those situations, and it's just like, what are you going to say? Oh, this is different than mine. Like, this isn't the sound. It's like, you had to play like you on equipment that wasn't yours. And you did. Right. You know? Yeah,
it was fine.
So,
you know, it's like, talk to any bass player that's ever traveled to play like an upright that's like on tour. It's like, they probably made it work on many different instruments.
Right. Yeah, and that's how it goes sometimes with tuba stuff. It's a little less common, but sometimes you borrow a tuba. I've played a whole recital on a tuba that is very different than my tuba. I did a regional tuba conference once where I played a recital, and it was going to be a lot of money to fly with, or it was going to be a lot of money to fly with my tuba. I think I couldn't fly Southwest was the deal, or maybe I didn't have a flight case yet. The details are a little bit fuzzy. And I think there was also a rental car situation there, and if I had my flight case, I would have had to rent a car that was big enough for it. I can't remember all the details of it, but it was when Mystery Jeffrey lived in Texas, and so I guess does that count as doxing him if we tell his state of origin, or where he is at one point in time?
Mystery Jeffrey remains a mystery.
Yeah, so he was in a mystery state while I was in a different mystery state. Now, I'll say where I was. This was when I was, doing my master's at Northwestern, and I was doing a tuba conference in Texas, and I flew down here, stayed with Mystery Jeffrey for a few days, and I then played a recital on his tuba, which was an interesting experience. And I knew to bring a different mouthpiece than what I normally played because my F tuba takes a different size mouthpiece, which is not a problem that anybody needs to worry about. But I needed something small to balance out how big his F tuba at the time is or was. And so I borrowed a mouthpiece from someone because I didn't really have something that fit that bill. I borrowed a mouthpiece, I used that mouthpiece, and I thought it went really well. I did one master class at North Texas, and I played for Professor Don Little, and he requested that I switch to his tuba for the master class because he liked the way his tuba sounded better than this other tuba, which was very different than my tuba. His and I's F tubas are relatively similar. So I guess the point is, it's like at some level you just have to make the equipment work. Dance with the person you brought to the school dance. I think that's an important way to think about it. It's really, there's no perfect instrument for every single thing that you could possibly do. There just isn't. There's not that's just not how it works. And in a perfect world, we all have a ton of horns. But even then, it's like, I don't care how many horns you have, you can't always bring every single instrument you have to a session or every single instrument you have to a performance or on tour or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So, it's definitely an interesting thing. And I think, too, one thing about equipment that's kind of funny is sometimes you can play on certain equipment, get a sound in your head, switch to different equipment, and kind of retain that sound because it's so clearly in your ear now. Like, I bet in some ways when you started playing, it was a 5, right, or was it a 4?
5 BS.
Okay. No. What was the picket?
Oh.
Was that a 4?
It was a 5M.
Okay. So I guess still a 5, but that's much bigger than what you're playing on now. And what maybe, again, I'm not saying this is exactly what happened or this is exactly how it works, but I think that there is a possibility that you playing on a 5 on a small bore trombone, you got used to that bigger, maybe more resonant, larger sort of sound. You heard yourself make that sound a lot for a small window of time. And then when you went smaller, you were able to, force is a bad word, but you were able to make it happen with different equipment.
It's possible, yeah. Like maybe like that. I mean, there were years of my life where I was playing only on that big stuff, and I was trying to eat the mic and get a big tone. I was doing all this stuff, and I was, chasing the dragon.
Yield proximity effect.
Yeah, that was lingering in my ear, and it probably still is to some degree. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I definitely I try to go for something that is big and Curtis Fleury anytime I'm doing like long tones or things like that on the small board.
Right. So, at the end of the day, again, going back to it, tone is mostly about what you have in your head. I think that's the most important thing that will always be, no matter how expensive your instrument is, no matter how expensive your mouthpiece is, no matter, if it's diamond crusted or whatever, the most important thing is going to be having the right sound. I think that in a lot of cases, the best player is the best player. It's not the person with the best equipment is the best. It's really just not how it usually works. But I did promise Connor that we maybe be on the shorter side, which I think I could also agree with. And since there haven't been any questions in a while, I feel like we should maybe call it there.
I think that was a good conversation.
Yeah, I think we stayed mostly on track today.
Yeah.
So maybe do we want to do Connor playing us out, as is our new tradition? Is that or no?
Today, I think I have to be confined in this space right now.
Okay.
So maybe if you could maybe.
I'll have to do something on euphonium again, just because this setup doesn't really. There's a desk in the way for trombone. I'll put it that way.
Could you grace us with some jazz euphonium on our?
Oh, some jazz euphonium. You're asking a lot.
I know.
Wow. I don't know the last time that I've done that, actually. I can't say
2016?
No, it wasn't that long ago. But it definitely you're not way off. That was the last time that I was doing it very regularly, for sure. Now I got to think of a tune to play on euphonium. I wasn't expecting to have this duty. No, we got to do it now. I just need to. I need to think. I got to keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. We're good. All right.